Septimius Severus ruled. Black people began to rule the Roman Empire. That's why for 193 AD is the time period. Then, 1453, the fall of Constantinople by the Ottoman Turks. That's when the Europeans began to, that's when the Europeans began to come back in power, the Caucasians, because what? They dwelt in an area called the Caucasus Mountains. So remember this, Rome, 193 AD, they come back in power in 1453. So the project is iconoclasm. That means breaker of images. So we're gonna read through these books.
You have 10 minutes.
Okay. We're gonna go to the book called the Icon, page 126. I had to write this down. It's a lot of pages, a lot of pages. And real quick, we're gonna relate this back to the Bible. So page 126, right here. I'm gonna show the pictures and I'm gonna pass it down. So everybody pass around, all right? Right here, you're gonna see dark images of Jesus Christ and his mother. The images of the prophets and the apostles, they were always painted dark-skinned people. It was the time of 1453 when they started to paint over them as Caucasian people. But they were always painted as dark people. And that's what I'm gonna show you in all these books. So a lot of these images were produced before the Renaissance. Now we're gonna go to page 155. Page 155, I'm gonna show you. 155. Now, I want you to look at this, and we're gonna start from right here. Notice right here, you're gonna pass it around. Notice right here, you're gonna see a dark image. You're gonna see a dark image right here. You're gonna see he was painted dark, but notice around him, they painted him what? A lighter image. You see it? Yeah. It's dark right there, and around him, you're gonna see a light. So pass it around the class so you can see it. Now, the next book, since we got short time, the next book is going to be Art Treasures of Russia. This book right here, you're going to see more images of the prophets and all of them being painted as dark-skinned men. Because a lot of times in class, in history, we always learn, when we see people like Septimius Severus, Charlemagne, the Anglo-Saxons, we always see them as these were great famous Caucasian men, when these were really black men that ruled. Rome, the Byzantine Empire, was ruled by black men. So now, go to page 37. Page 37. And on this one, same history and all that. Right here, you see the Archangel Michael in the middle, Jesus Christ. Right next to him is Gabriel. What color are they painted? They're painted very dark. But in many books after 1453, they're painted white. Why? You had famous iconoclasts, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, 3 Ninja Turtles. They were hired to paint over these images. When I went to Rome and the Vatican, and I saw the Sistine Chapel, he was hired to paint biblical characters, Caucasian men. Why? So that when a lot of people begin to read the history of the Israelites and Jews, they would think that they were Caucasians. That's why. That's history. Now, go to page 78. Page 78. Page 78. So pass it around. Oh, right there. This here is this is a scene from the Bible called the Transfiguration. And when you see the prophets, you're going to see them as men of color. Notice here his garment is white, but the skin complexion on the prophets, they're all dark-skinned men. Because when you read the scriptures, you always read about the prophets. They always describe themselves as dark-skinned men. And our forefathers, black men, they painted them as that image of being men of color. But what happened? Remember this. 1453, the Renaissance. So now, we're going to go to Spain, the history and art. We're going to go to page 60. I want you guys to look at this. Now these women are what color? White. What color are their fingertips? Black. What happened? They got their fingertips dipped in chocolate? No, they weren't dipped in chocolate. They were hired to paint over the images. Why their fingertips black, but their skin is white? Because they had iconoclasts. 1453. Paint over these images. When I went to the Louvre in Paris, a lot of the biblical images throughout the museum, white. Then there was a back room. And when I went inside that room, I seen a lot of dark-skinned images. I seen icons. And I was like, Dad, they got all these images in the back room, But in the open area, when you're walking through, you see all these images, Caucasian men, famous Caucasian men, you would think. But in the back room, smaller area, you see images that, what I'm showing you, dark images, all right? So, wait, where's the book, The Icon? Right when you finish, pass it back up. There's something I want to read. I'm not going to be able to go through every page. Now, I'm going to show you Queen Elizabeth.
5 minutes.
No problem. Queen Elizabeth, I'm going to show you something. Page 77. I'm going to show you right here. Right here is Henry VIII. Right there. Okay, good. Thank you. Go to the page where it says the icons of Constantinople. Right here is King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII, if you type it on Wikipedia, you're going to see a Caucasian man. That's what you're going to see, Caucasian man. This is Henry VIII. He's a black man. Famous king, black man. But you see them as Caucasian men. Guess who this is in the middle? Queen Elizabeth I. She's a black woman. This is Queen Elizabeth I. What happened? 1453. Whitewashed all images. That's what happened. They whitewashed history. So pass that around. Pass that around. So now we're going to read, just right here in the beginning. I'm sorry. Right here in the beginning. Almost finished. Almost finished. Read this part where it says, it may seem daring. Right here. Wait, no, start from iconoclasm.
It says iconoclasm.
Mm-hmm.
Venetian looting in 1204.
Right.
And the sack by the Turks in 1453.
Remember I said the Ottoman Turks sacked the Byzantine Empire, 1453. That's what
Are the main reasons why only very few icons have survived in Constantinople.
Right.
It may seem daring, therefore, to write an entire chapter on the icons of the capital.
Right.
Yet the situation is not quite so hopeless.
The situation of a lot of these icons with dark-skinned people, it's not so hopeless. Why? Because there are still some images that survive. That's why I'm able to show you these dark-skinned images. They didn't whitewash every painting because it was too many. Read on.
It says, icons existed not only as panel paintings,
right,
but also as frescoes and wall mosaics,
right,
some of which have emerged from layers of whitewash.
They've emerged from what?
Of whitewash?
Layers of whitewash. That's why when I showed you that Christian woman, she had her image around there. She was all painted white, but her fingertips were black. Why? Because a lot of times they didn't finish whitewashing these images. Now that's all I wanted. Real quick, almost finished, bro. Almost finished. Almost finished. This is page 116. Guess who this is? Spartacus. Spartacus. This is found in Tel Aviv, 1954. He's a black man. But why do we always see him as Caucasian men? Whitewashing. That's why. This is Spartacus. You can pass the book. You can pass the book. And one more. Two more points. Go to page 77. This is the Oxford, oldest English university. The Oxford Illustrated History of Medieval Europe. We're going to go to page 77, and we're going to look on the wall. Almost done, page 77. I think it's page 77. Oh, 177, I'm sorry. 177. Right here. I want you guys to look at this. This is Hosea, Daniel, King David, and Daniel, Hosea, Jonah, and King David. What color are they painted? Brown. Black, right. Brown men. Guess when this was before 1453. This is the remarkable windows at Augsburg Cathedral. So you guys can pass that around. Here you go. Now we're going to read one scripture to show why it happened in history. Okay, thank you. First Maccabees. In the Holy Bible, you have a book called the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha was taken out of the Holy Bible in the 1700s by the Protestant church. The Apocrypha, you could get a King James Version Bible, 1611. You'll see the Apocrypha in it. This Bible has the Apocrypha in it. It cost me a great deal of money, but it has it. It's still in it. So read First Maccabees chapter 1. First Maccabees 1:1. First Maccabees. We're going to read about Alexander the Great, and we're going to read about what the Greeks did when they took the records of the Bible.
First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, and smitten Darius, king of the Persians.
Remember, Alexander's forefather was Philip of Macedon. Now jump to verse 9 about what happened. You're going to see what happened when the Greeks.
And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so that they sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth.
What did the Bible just say?
And evils were multiplied in the earth.
Because what the Greeks were doing, it was all against the Holy Scriptures. So go to 1 Maccabees 3:48. We're going to show you what the Greeks did. The Greeks took the records of the Israelites, and then there's something they did. Okay. Thank you.
First Maccabees 3:48.
Listen to what the Greeks did. Because iconoclasm, breaking images, that's nothing new. The Greeks took the records of the Israelites and they painted over them as white men. You're going to see it right here.
And laid open the book of the law.
The book of the law is the Holy Bible.
Wherein the heathen.
The heathen is talking about the Greeks because this is when Alexander, this is the time of Antiochus. But it's from chapter 1, it's talking about Alexander the Great. Chapter 3, it goes in the time of Antiochus. He came out of the line of Seleucus, one of Alexander the Great's 4 generals. Come on.
Wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images.
That's what they did. They took the records of the Israelites and what they do?
Paint the likeness of their images.
Here it is in this called Our Living Bible. Israelite priests painted black men. These are Jews, black men. But what did the Greeks do? They painted over it. So I'm sorry, that was it. That was it. If you guys have any questions, please ask them now. All right? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Yes.
Was this only in America that they really did this?
No. They did this throughout all of Europe. They did this
No, but I mean, like.
That question's irrelevant. This didn't happen. He's not talking about
When I
America.
say only in America, I mean, like. Are there more pictures that are shown throughout the world that do have darker skin?
Well, that's what he's talking about.
Right. That's exactly what I was showing.
That's it.
Because like this book, Art Treasures of Russia. In this book, Art Treasures of Russia, you see dark skin images all over throughout Russia. Because when you look up the history of the slave trade, they took a lot of slaves from Russia. Why was slaves in Russia? Because black people ruled Russia at one point in time. The reason why.
Would they have pictures of?
Yeah, a lot of these areas they're there. Because the reason why they called it the Dark Ages was because dark people ruled. So they called it the Dark Ages. That's why. But when they came back in power, 1453, they overthrew everything. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah. Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. Are you talking about England?
Exactly. Any other questions? No other questions? I know y'all got questions. What's your question?
You're basically saying all the rulers, and according with everyone, all the prophets, Jesus, were all black.
All
Who this nigga on that nag?
The term Moor started to become interchangeable with the term black because it was basically the same thing. But when the slave trade started, they tried to objectify black people, Moorish people. So they would use the term interchangeably and they would just switch on to calling people black. But if you look at a lot of old documents, there's even slave ships called Blackamoor, if you look at slave records. There was even a boxer out of Virginia who was very popular in the early 1800s named Tom Molyneux, and his nickname was the Moor. So that name was definitely used interchangeably with black or Negro at that time.
Moor means black, like Negro, Ethiopian. Moor means black. Moor is not a people. Moor is a color. And they have taken this word Moor and they have associated Moor with Muslim. There were Moors that weren't Muslim. Moor means black. There were Christian Moors. There were Moors that practiced a traditional African faith system. So that Moor means black, simple.
When the Moors went into Europe, they changed the appearance of the population. Do you see? So you have Italians, Spaniards being darker than the Scandinavians. A Scandinavian person told me that they never considered the Italians or Jewish people to be white. Do you see? Because the lighter people are further north.
When I went to Europe, I would always look at pictures and I would always see a Moor, and sometimes I would see like a skull and bones. And many of the Moors would have a skull and bones flag. That's what pirates are known for. There were many Moorish pirates. There was even a Barbary War where the U.S. was fighting Moorish pirates up in North Africa and the Barbary Coast. And there's even a secret organization called the Skull and Bones. And we know that Masonry comes from Moorish science. So there's always a connection there with the Moors.
And it's important that as we begin to develop an understanding of this society, that it's not Freemason as we know it. And that the Moors brought in this knowledge into Europe. Africans brought this knowledge into Europe. And in bringing this knowledge into Europe, the Knights Templars and other organizations were born out of this. And peoples of European descent were exposed to alchemy, okay? The periodic table of elements, the laboratory, how to take information, how to take elements and atoms, and to begin to manipulate them to make them into different types of molecules. The basic one is hydrogen, 2 hydrogen is helium, 3 hydrogen is lithium, 6 is carbon, 8 is oxygen. So you have this alchemy that's going to come, and they're going to begin to study, they're going to begin to learn, they're going to create societies that's going to develop an understanding. This is going to be what eventually is going to become Freemasonry, because only a select group of people in Europe is going to be exposed to this information.
Because the secret of Masonry, of who we really are, the Moors, is being here on this land, this particular land. Because it was called, in many names, you had Turtle Island, that we called it, or Tula, or El Marak, the different terms that we had. And the original map of America was written by a guy named Idrisi. The original map was written in Sanskrit.
Antarctica was actually mapped by a Moor. And most people don't know it was mapped by a Moor. And they have old topographical evidence of old maps of Antarctica. That's why the Nazis fled there, because they knew that there were places there under the ice that they could actually inhabit and hide.
Remember, when they attacked Africa, they did not attack Africa physically. They did not attack Africa educationally. They attacked Africa spiritually. Jomo Kenyatta said when the European first came to Africa, the Africans had the land and the white man had the Bible. White man told him to close his eyes, get on his knees and pray. Jomo said when the black man opened his eyes, the white man had the land and the black man had the Bible. We have bought into a story that we told them. They have twisted it. They got it twisted. We have now bought that story back.
What we call the African and the communities that that person lived in is where the concept of religion comes from. Europe never produced a religion, ever. Asia receives its religion from Africa. All of them. Buddhism, Hinduism, Shinto. As a matter of fact, to be more scholarly, starts with Hinduism. The first Hindu gods to come across were black Africans. And they came across, they were called Sambo, which is now a derogatory term used for blacks, mulattoes, etc. Sambo.
Jesus is a name which did not come into existence in the English form until the 1600s. The letter J was not invented until the 1600s. Let me say this again. Now, the letter J was not invented until the 1600s. So the reality is, Jesus is not the name of that person. His name is an Amharic name, Yeshua.
1482. Leonardo da Vinci was commissioned to paint a painting of Christ and the 12 disciples. This was 1482, 10 years before Columbus set sail, because that painting would be the greatest weapon used in colonialism, and still is right now, because many black people around the world still have that original Last Supper. And so when Leonardo was asked to paint that picture, he got his uncle to actually sit in, and this is an historic record. He got his uncle to sit in and pose as Christ. And he got 12 criminals from a local jail who happened to be available to sit in as the 12 disciples.
The only reason you call God by that name is because your former enslaver, your former oppressor, taught you that name. He never taught you the real name. He never gave you the keys to the power to free yourself spiritually, so that you are now spiritually or religiously still a slave.
The African population in North America is the third largest black population in the world in any geopolitical state. Why don't we have a single word out of one of our language for God that we use? The Arabs use their word for God. The Jews use their word for God. The Catholics use their word for God. The Japanese use their word for God. The African is the only population that don't have an African word for God. Yet, studies coming out of Geneva over the last 30 years prove that we are the most spiritual people in America, in the world, not just America. We worship with a greater propensity than any other people in the world, but we don't have a single word in our language for our divine.
The word Christ is a title. It's not a name. Christ means the anointed one. And there were many people before the birth of Jesus who also bore that title, Christ. There were 16 people who were known as Christ. So Jesus was the last of saviors of mankind, saviors of a group of people who were known as Christ.
when you talk about the image of Christ. It is important that we no longer ascribe to the European image of Christ. Why? Because the brain is a associating organism. It stores everything as pictures. And because it is associating, if you force feed an African child that Christ is white, because the brain associates, as that child begins to grow, the brain will associate white Christ with white people. And so if white Jesus is God, then white people must also be the gods of humanity. And so guess what? The power in the painting is transferred to the people who resemble that painting. And so it is difficult to pray to a white Jesus and not in some way feel inferior to white people. And that's why when I talk to Christian ministers, I often tell them you have to change these pictures. They say it don't matter. Of course it matters. Why do you think the European went around the world and systematically altered the image of Christ in every major cathedral, every major church, every corner of the globe? Because it is difficult to oppress a people whose image of the God doesn't look like the oppressor. But when God and the oppressor look one in the same, then the people will come to believe that the oppression was ordained by God.
He is the greatest writer in the English language. But what did William Shakespeare actually look like? We may have the answer in a picture worth a lot more than 1,000 words. Richard Roth has the story from London.
It was at Britain's National Portrait Gallery 3 years ago that an art restorer named Cobb noticed a Shakespeare portrait resembled a painting in his own family's art collection. Today, some Shakespeare scholars here claim the Cobb painting's actually the real thing, the only known lifetime portrait of the world's most famous playwright. In the industry called bardology, it's like claiming discovery of a holy grail, the source for an engraving of Shakespeare's likeness on the first folio of his work, and for a bust on his tomb in Stratford, the only images generally accepted as authentic.
Shakespeare became a highly successful and wealthy man towards the end of his life. His will is the will of a rich man, and this is a portrait of a rich man.
When the National Portrait Gallery last looked at the evidence, its experts concluded the original lifetime likeness of the bard was a painting known as the Chandos portrait, which it called an emblem of national identity. What's in a name may still be trivial, but there's a whole new argument about which face goes with it. Richard Roth, CBS News, London.
Ah.